We are back with Digital Health Off the Record, our newest and latest podcast. And I think we are sort of in our fifth one already, Farrell. I'm really looking forward to this session as well. Um, so my name is Edwin from C&Flow and hosting this podcast together with Farrell.
Hey, I'm Farrell and I'm from OptiTrial. And today on the podcast, we're going to be taking a look at ICH GCP E6 R3 on account of it finally going effective in the UK and Canada this month. And we're going to take a look at some of the key areas of the scope and what you need to consider as part of that, since it's been quite a while since the last update, although it's a market improvement since the first iteration that took 20 years to go from, R1 to R2, but it's only been 9 years since R2 came out. But as we know, there's been a whole lot of changes in the world and in the world of clinical trials. So it's really focused on how to create modern trials for today. So where R2 was looking at just introducing the concept of risk-based monitoring to traditional trials, R3 reimagines that for, the modern clinical trial and try to aim to do quality by design from the start as well. So it's focusing on having participant centricity at the core as well, which is totally a new concept as well. And technology, no longer optional. It's very specifically referenced and it's expected now. So
Yeah.
how about
Yeah,
you,
so I
Edwin?
would say
What's
for
the
for
impacts
for
you've seen?
yeah, so Farrell, I would say for us with obviously primary focus on digital health, this regulation comes at a perfect time. It does feel, as you say, it now becomes effective in the UK and Canada just this month. It feels that it's out there for quite a while. So every time we come to the same sort of news, it's like, hey, it's effective now, and it feels like, hey, but we've been dealing with this for quite a while though. So yeah, I think but obviously very happy with that. And like any other type of sort of regulations, it does leave room for interpretation. Again, it's a guidance that we tend to completely adhere to. And yeah, obviously, I'm a great support of all the changes and impact it has on the usage of technology in clinical trials. Um, yeah, the things that we will touch upon this session, as you said, is the RBQM, taking a deeper dive into this, the patient centricity, the impact of it. Um, we're not going into detail around e-consent this time, but yes, it is, and I'm very happy about this, that it's specifically being called out, which is in a way interesting as well, that this is just one of the digital solutions. But yeah, completely happy with that.
Yeah, totally ties into the patient centricity element to try and put the patient at the forefront because, consent forms are 40 plus pages of legalese, which e-consent only helps to try and improve the understanding of, what patients are signing up to, which is absolutely at the core of that patient centricity and really will help with the recruitment and retention side of things as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you look overall on all the topics in sort of this new regulations, it all has positive sides for patients. Um, I'm not saying less impact because obviously there will be impacted, but it's all positively. Whereas if you look at sort of probably the sponsor, the impact these regulations have on sponsors or sites, it's obviously intended to be all positive, but there will be some work to do. And
Mhm.
so it's potentially more cumbersome or a new burden for sponsors or sites. But yeah, that comes with the industry that we live in.
Yeah, and I think that's just the burden of any change management in anything in life. But I do think overwhelmingly it's positive change for probably all the stakeholders, although you probably have some site staff probably concerned as well, because if it's introducing new tools, technologies, they've been burnt before. But in terms of the first topic that we're looking to go into in RBQM, I think that has a very clear focus towards being a lot more pragmatic and focusing on the critical to quality side of things, rather than trying to treat all data equally and expecting like 100% SDV and oversight, which is
Hmm.
with the more and more amounts of data that's being captured. And we mentioned previously that it's like in the past 10 years, like triple the amount of data that's being captured as part of clinical trials. And it is totally unrealistic. And now the regulators are, totally on board with that, that the current volumes of data, it's not sustainable and it's not realistic to expect to review and treat it all exactly the same.
No, at the conference that I was earlier this week, it was emphasized that only 30% of all the collected data is being used. So, yeah,
That's an even
really something,
improvement. I think
because
we
we
said,
can doesn't mean we should.
yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting. With regards to the RBQM, for me, and we come both from the same sort of organization, is it does feel that we've been, at least I've been dealing with that for like 10 years ago already. So that's where it really started to become a hot topic, and especially within the organizations itself, to look at these quality factors, how to deal with this. Where I noticed where it's challenging is like, okay, how do you deal with the findings? Or if you observe something, how do we need to act on what we see? And yeah, it's something I think we need to be conscious of. And I think with the regulations, I think it's expected that sites will be part of defining the quality factors as well. And um, that I'm sort of eager to understand how that will translate into practice. So we've got patient advocacy groups normally in to give input in studies, but now we are maybe rightly also want to include sites, and they will define different ones that then yeah, I'm confident about that that they will define new ones.
yeah, absolutely. And if they're treating patients with the condition day to day, they're the ones that probably have an acute insight into, what is important to the patients, or what are the things that they're seeing that could have the biggest impact. And as well, if they've to operationally make the study happen and they're accountable to everything that happens in the study to their patients and the
Yeah,
patient safety, that's their
yeah,
number one thing, is patient safety. So they definitely do have a very big voice
yeah,
to make sure that everything is
yeah,
above board and in line with expectation,
yeah.
and no corners are being cut in that regard.
Yeah. Any other implications, practical implications of RBQM?
Um, I would say it's it's more about being very intentional with your design. So being clear up front that you're not, like you said, throwing out a big net and you're trying to catch everything, but you're really putting thought into this study. This is actually what's important. These are the priorities. These are the more exploratory pieces, and treating it as such. So
Yeah,
really, really makes you think about what burden you're putting onto everybody in the study, and how you're expecting them to act as part of it, and
yeah,
what their responsibilities should be when it
yeah,
comes to implementation and also on the monitoring side.
yeah,
So if they're missing some data, but it's exploratory data, okay, that's fine.
yeah,
If it's your primary endpoint, then not so fine,
yeah,
which is, I think, how it
yeah.
should be as well.
Do you also see it impacting the number of sort of on-site visits for patients?
I think the opportunities there from everything that's included, it is ties into the patient centricity and the very clear call outs to digital health technologies as part of that, and any solutions that would help boost decentralization.
Mm-hmm.
There is in the Annex 2, it fully covers novel trial designs and
Mm-hmm.
decentralized trials. So it is at the forefront of how to be more pragmatic and how to help sponsors to achieve trials that fit around patients and not
Yeah.
takes over their lives.
Yeah.
So I think that's less less time visiting, going into site visits is the consequence or the remedy from using
Yeah.
these types of tools as well.
Yeah.
And how about you? How do you see, what did you see when it came to the DHT side on the document?
So the digital health, yeah, it's clearly what's outlined more and better are the different type of roles and responsibilities across the different stakeholders.
Hmm.
I think the biggest impact is for maybe um, site, that they now have a clear responsibility, especially when they utilize their own technology. In clinical care, it normally isn't that big of an issue, but if they are going to utilize this within the in clinical trial environment, then yeah, you enter a different sort of field that you need to comply to, which is not always understood. So I think I think it's an interesting one for sure, and a good, in principle, good change. But practically, how that impacts and how people deal with this is, yeah, something we need to work on, I think. And about yourself?
Absolutely. Because I think that's like, it's one of the semi-gray areas because it does really call out where sites can use their own technologies, probably with in mind things like having EHR to EDC type solutions or medical imaging. But it does also say that the sponsor has their responsibility to make sure that any site technology is fit for use, which it's kind of that gray area too of how, how far do they go with that? Is that going to be taken advantage of? Are people going to just narrow in and say this is only the scope, or are they going to try and get an inch and take a mile? Say no, we can use our own e-consent, we can use our own eCOA or whatever they might want to use, just because there are so many solutions out there. So for sites, it is always one of the challenging elements that they have to try and get used to each and every technology, each and every
Yeah,
portal, so on and so forth.
yeah,
So I think that's one of the interesting elements of it. But I think also the focus moved away from the solution itself and more put an emphasis on the data and the data lifecycle and workflows. So it kind of opened the
yeah.
opportunities as well for integrating different tools and systems as well, like I said, with EHR TDC, but also some of the other technologies that can be connected.
Yeah, yeah, I think sort of to build on that, the area around data governance integrity is closely aligned to the technology itself. The data workflows need to be better understood. It should, if that's being understood much better, then we should be reducing the duplication of this data,
Hmm.
reducing manual data entry, those kind of things. So yeah, I think that's. I wonder. We've done sessions around data flows, generating
Mm,
or bringing it all into a single place, a source of truth.
yeah.
That needs to be understood, but then having the insights for the people to understand all the data holistically is then equally important. So I wonder whether that's taken into consideration as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that kind of mentality or culture shift from source data to e-source data, and then from, just because you've got digital data doesn't mean you capture the same data across every system you use, but knowing what's that, what is your source of truth when it comes to your e-source, and then making references and not creating new So trying to really reduce any duplications and
Yeah.
avoiding areas where
Yeah.
I suppose the data could fall out of sync, because it shouldn't. It
Yeah.
should just be
Yeah.
this is what is
We
fact.
yeah. Well, the positive side though is that if we are able to get only one source of
Hmm?
truth, the downside though is though we need to be extremely confident that that data source is accurate.
Yeah.
That to start with, but it reduces the amount of reconciliation that we eventually need to
Yeah.
do, which is
Well,
extremely time consuming.
and at the same time, if you know this is the one true source, it's easier to make sure that's correct than, let's say you've got two or three different sources, and now you've got to
Yeah,
reconcile, like you said, across those. So in this
yeah,
scenario, which of the three is the correct one versus
exactly.
the initial one,
Yeah, let's not talk about reconciliation too much because that brings up a lot of things which were not particularly
PTSD.
great. But yeah, that's really really hard to do. And obviously now with the technology, you can do this type of reconciliations much quicker. But yeah, if you don't even need to do it, then yeah, that's definitely going to change a lot.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think a lot of what was covered as well within the document when it came to the technologies was about it kind of seemed to split the principles, which is good, in terms of validation for platforms versus the study level fit for purpose. So it kind of acknowledged that there are very two distinct types of systems within clinical trials as well. So it has, your ETMFs that kind of exist across all of your studies, more of a platform, versus like your DHT, which you need to configure per study in line with what your requirements are. So it's more of a, how does that fit into your study, versus this platform works across every single study in a broader pretense. So it did seem it was a good ideation or acceptance that, just because a tool works for one doesn't mean that it's ready for your study.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other areas when it comes to like the patient centricity side that you thought were a good call out? Because you mentioned about e-consent earlier, but not really going too much into it. But I think that's
No, yeah,
quite
as I
important.
commented earlier, I think if you overall look at all the high level topics in this new regulations, it's all seen as a positive and an opportunity for patients. So really, it all being patient centric, which is good to see. And it's like and there's at the same time a lot of work to do for sponsors and sites to uh, to allow that. But yeah, when it comes to patient centricity, when we talked about the technologies, it's like the usage of their wearables at home, completion of questionnaires, this kind of thing. And yeah, for me, an important thing is the e-consent. Uh, it doesn't talk about the ideal state of an e-consent. I don't, obviously, that shouldn't be in the regulations, don't get me wrong, but enabling patients to read the information at any time, at any place, is something that is great to have. And also the signing off and amending, signing off amendments, for example, as well, is great to have included, and definitely being patient centric. I think it's even site centric as well, because the struggle with consent, for example, sits within ICF amendments, and bringing back patients to have it signed in a timely manner is extremely time consuming and labor intensive, costs a lot for just one particular update. The the amount of follow-up it takes if they don't meet those timelines is extreme. So this should create a lot of positives for sites as well.
Definitely. Maybe another area to tap into that we briefly mentioned earlier was about the enablement for the site technology side. And I think one of the potential rabbit holes is when it comes to that sponsor ownership, about making sure that the site solutions are fit for purpose or validated state. I think that could lead to a few challenges based on it's likely is going to fall to like local study teams and CRAs and so on, who are maybe not to say anything bad towards them, but that's not their natural skill set to, confirm validation of different systems. And in a global study, that the scale and size of how much you have to do that is going to be it's going to be a big task. So how do you see that kind of side of it panning out, or what would be the big challenges that need solving when they're looking to
Yeah,
try and enable site-centered things like, okay, use your tech, but
yeah. Well, I see probably chaos from the start. Chaos in with respect to like no one really understanding what they are responsible for.
hmm,
And even if they have an understanding what they're responsible, then they have no idea like how and what needs to be done in order to become like the true sort of system owner, if I may use that language. I think sponsors and the industry itself, like the companies, vendors, they are specialized in developing these type of technologies. They've got the right resources and knowledge in house in order to set a proper framework. I think sites who are doing clinical trials do not have that infrastructure in place and that knowledge. I understand that they've got a certain responsibility, but it's going to demand a lot of them and they need to go out of their own expertise. And so I only see in sort of an increase of additional administrative work for them that drives them away from being patient centric. So that's my first observation, I would say.
yeah, because I guess it's that interesting piece as well between there was enough ambiguity. So it's like I mentioned before about the validated platforms versus the study specific solutions, and then that's where it kind of will blur across. So how would you, if it is something that needs to be a study specific solution, who's are sites really going to build that themselves, build every study after it's already been built by
Yep.
another supplier, or and then how does a monitor make sure that they are totally in sync, especially with updates, so on and so forth? So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah, I'm really eager to see how that works out because as you said, like the monitor, you need to sort of assess eventually a system. But against what are you going to assess it? To your internal validation
mm,
procedures? That's quite extensive. So there needs to be a minimum. And the intended use, the user access rights, there are so many different things that you need to consider when looking at another system. And from a CRA perspective, and this is yeah maybe a real life example, when I came across as a project manager with an e-consent solution or even uh, a site trial master file that they digitized. It was like, okay, but as a CRA, I will need to review the source documents. Do I have access to your system? No, because
mhm.
you're external. It's like, okay, but how do we deal with this? So there are
How to
really
segregate just the study side of
practical,
that
yeah,
system,
the
right?
practicalities of the regulations are going to be huge and no one I yeah I don't have the answer for sure, but
Hmm.
I don't believe that sites will come up with the final solutions, and this needs to be a really good collaboration between the industry and sites because yeah it's going to be a nightmare, especially when it it's being audited against the new
Hmm.
regulations. That's when sort of the things hit the fan.
Exactly. And I think the other side of that as well is the things that haven't been said as part of this update is, things like where AI falls into it. So if the site, all tools now, they're starting to come with some out the box or upsold AI solutions. So if a site is, let's say, use a good example of, they've got their medical imaging solution. What if that's coming with, some AI reviews as part of it and to help them along their way? So how do you tell, like, is that acceptable for use? Do you have to report that AI solutions were used as part of this and that? Definitely going to be outside of, CRA's purview, and
Yeah.
it's not even covered yet. So is it still fine if the site is still accountable to, reviewing the images and confirming whatever has been found? So it is grey, and it'll be interesting to see how it gets interpreted. And no doubt it's going to be interpreted differently by absolutely everybody and every sponsor and every team
Yeah.
within a sponsor as well.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I've learned, and but maybe that's how I've been educated within this environment, is that clinical care is not equal to clinical trials, and it's the sort of the next level, and it has to deal with additional regulations, and maybe we need to come a little bit closer towards each other, maybe a little bit less rigid within clinical trials, as long as we can safeguard the things that are really important, which is patient safety and reliable data, those kind of things. And maybe most of the systems already have these type of capabilities, but are not maybe captured in such a way. Maybe they're already proper validated, but not with the right sort of controls in it. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
super. Farrell, I think we covered just this. Obviously, we scratched the surface of this particular topic. I think maybe we can go into other sort of areas of this next time. I know that,
Mhm.
and I think the annex around the R3 is still in the final revision, so I think people can provide their input as well. Maybe on the regulation part, that could be another thing for us to continue to the discussion.
Mhm.
But for this podcast, I think we will leave it for now. Our next podcast is going to look at sort of, well, we talked about industry trends, and I think what we've seen lately is the big pharma signing up and closely partnering with the big AI companies, all I think with the aim to bring drugs to the market much faster. And I think we are interested to unfold that, and maybe to give our view on how that really going to impact, and if that's maybe true or not.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the great AI arms race has begun, and it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve in that area. And obviously, there's some really good use cases, but it being such a big industry, there are definitely going to be certain areas where AI use fits much more seamlessly. Because for everything that we talked about R3 today, doesn't touch AI, doesn't touch things like synthetic data or any digital twins or accountability for agents as part of it. It has very clear roles and responsibilities across IRBs, sites, and sponsors. But I think that's going to be part of the next wave of next iterations, which will definitely be interesting and definitely going to be the standard is going to be set as part of these new collaborations across. Which brings us to a close because that's going to be fun to talk about next time. So thanks for listening, and I've been Farrell,
I'm
and you've
Edwin,
been.
and I would say sign up, like, follow us on the different channels, and if you have any feedback on sort of the topics that we discussed, or have any ideas for us to talk about next week or in the upcoming podcast, let us know. And thank you for listening.
See you later.
Bye bye.